right, folks, we are going to jump in and get started today with our number 2 session of the year of Alchemy in the Lab. Welcome. We got a great panel today and discussion. We're going to be talking about identity and access management, and we're going to talk about how Okta is leading the charge in trying to, find new ways to enhance identity and how you deal with identity in your enterprise. I got a great panel of guests today, and for those who don't know me, my name is Pete Downing. I'm the host of In the Lab, and behind the scenes, I do a lot with our digital marketing and tech marketing. But I'm not the smart guy. I'm just the guy that runs these. So on the call today, we got 3 great folks, and I'm going to start off with Pascal. So Pascal, give yourself a quick introduction, and what do you do for Alchemy, and how long have you been in the industry?
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, my name is Pascal Pierre-Louis, and I'm a principal architect and lead over our identity practice here at Alchemy. I've been at Alchemy for almost 8 years now, but I've been working in the identity security space for over 15 years at this point. But yeah, I specialize in all things identity security, where I help customers effectively map identity capabilities or solution capabilities to their business requirements.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. All right. Next on the call, we have Ron. Ron, give yourself a quick introduction. What do you do for Okta? And you're based just north of the border in Toronto, right?
Yeah, I'm in the 51st state, depending on who you support here. So, no, my name is Ron Hassanwalia. I have been with Okta over the last 8 years, focusing on identity. My history is a software engineering turned to cyber. So 20 years in cyber across mobile and identity security. So really excited today to talk about an offering that has been had on the market for the last 18 months called Identity Security Posture Management, and really focused on helping companies stay secure and, iterate towards that zero trust approach.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy as well. And then finally on the call, we have Joe, and I'm not even going to try to say your last name, but you're based, if I recall, in Austin, right? And good old Texas. And what do you do for Okta, and how long have you been with Okta? And you're on mute.
Going off mute would help. So I've been with Okta for a little over 8 years now, and I've done various roles. So initially started in consulting, where I would implement for our customers, moved on to becoming an architect, architecting solutions on how Okta would fit in customer environments. Gradually gravitated towards product, and I led NPI for our professional services team. And now I work in product acceleration, unique role where I sit between our field teams and our product team, essentially evangelizing the products, the NPI products coming down the pipe, helping our field understand the technical intricacies, helping customers understand and adopt the products, and taking the feedback and feeding that back into our product organizations. So we're building what customers want. So that's what I do today. And I support identity threat protection. And I'm excited to talk about that with you guys. Thanks.
Thank you for jumping in too as well. And with that, Pascal, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you're going to take us through the state of identity security and from our point of view. And you got a lot of cool slides to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Pete. So to kick things off, we want to start by framing the conversation with a high-level view of the identity security landscape, right? We're going to take some time to just talk about some of the trends and challenges that we're seeing in the field. Now, this particular quote, it's always a powerful one to reflect on, and it really captures the reason why we're all here today on this webinar, right? It also speaks to why we've all dedicated, including myself, like ourselves, to this particular field, and why the identity security space continues to evolve and innovate, right? Identity security is critical as human and non-human identities increase, right? As organizations expand their digital ecosystems, the number of human and non-human identities, like your service accounts, APIs, bots, right? We're seeing that those identities continue to grow exponentially, right? And this surge essentially has made identity security a critical priority, particularly as each of these identities represents a potential attack surface that we must protect. Now, let's just talk about why identity security has become such a critical issue in modern cybersecurity, right? First, we're seeing a massive increase and sprawl, frankly, in both human and non-human identities, as mentioned in the previous slide, right? Think your standard accounts, your contractors, your service accounts, APIs, bots, tokens, right? These are all forms of identities. And as these identities grow in complexity, the attack surface also expands, giving attackers way more entry points, right? Especially in today's environment. Right? And identity is now a top target for attackers, right? It's no longer just about breaching firewalls anymore, right? Threat actors are going after identities because once they get one, especially a privileged one, they can move freely within the environment. And the stats support this, right? According to the IDSA report on trends in securing digital identities, right, 90% of organizations reported an identity-related breach in the past year. And what's even more striking is that 84% of organizations surveyed said they suffered direct business impact as a result of these breaches. Right. Also, the MITRE attack framework, right now, it actually reinforces that half of all exploit tactics in the wild now exploit identity. And that's essentially a huge shift in how threats are executed in today's environment. Even more concerning is that 75% of these attacks are malware free. That means attackers aren't triggering alerts from antivirus tools anymore. They're actually using valid credentials and behaving like normal users. And that makes these types of intrusions stealthy and fairly difficult to detect. Right? In most cases, attackers are looking to exploit dormant or inactive accounts or misconfigured privileges within applications. And once they gain control of a privileged identity, they can blend in with everyday user activity and quietly move laterally across systems. And that makes detection incredibly challenging. Now, let's just talk about the risk of fragmented identity systems, right? When identity security is spread across disconnected systems, think multiple directories, cloud applications, legacy platforms, it becomes incredibly difficult to manage access consistently. And this fragmentation weakens an organization's overall security posture and significantly increases the risk of identity-based threats, right? So without centralized identity visibility, it's easy for dormant accounts, over provisioned access, and inconsistencies to go undetected. And so to mitigate this risk, we really need to think about shifting from being reactive to being more proactive. And that starts with establishing a unified identity security foundation, one that supports accurate correlation of users and consistent governance across multiple environments. So with that context in mind, let's shift our focus to unified identity security. And we'll talk about what it means and essentially why it matters. So let's talk about some of the benefits of a unified identity security approach. Right? First, it closes security gaps, right? By breaking down silos between your IAM tool, your PAM tool, your IGA systems or solutions, you can reinforce consistent access policies across your environment, right? And that helps to dramatically reduce the risk of unauthorized access and privilege creep, right? Second, it can help boost efficiency, right? By consolidating tools and simplifying identity workflows, right? That means your teams can spend less time managing fragmented systems and more time focused on strategic tasks. And this can help lower operational costs. And third, it can help to speed up your threat response, right? With a centralized view of identity activity, you can effectively detect suspicious behavior faster and take action in real time before any significant damage is done. And lastly, to support smarter security, leveraging identity data within a centralized platform allows you to apply dynamic risk-based controls. So access decisions can adjust based on user behavior, context, and risk levels. Right. So just the overall bottom line here is that a unifying identity system not only improves protection, but also drives efficiency. It also drives agility, and it allows you to execute smarter security outcomes. So now, with that, with the landscape evolving so quickly, right? It's really important to ask yourselves, what should we be planning on next, right? Like, especially as you're building your identity security roadmaps and strategies, right? And so let's walk through some of the top areas that we recommend focusing on. Now, I want to start with basics, right? And I'm sure many of you, especially with the number of Okta customers that we saw in the poll, right? I'm sure many of you on this webinar have already gone down this journey or already starting down this journey, right? And really, when you're building or strengthening an identity security program, one of the most important first steps is implementing multi-factor authentication, or MFA, right? And there's several reasons for that, right? MFA blocks unauthorized access, right? By adding additional layers of verification beyond just username and password, right? This makes it significantly harder for attackers to compromise accounts, even if the credentials are stolen. It also helps to benefit some of the most common attack types like phishing, credential theft, brute force login attempts, and these are often the starting point for the more serious breaches that we're trying to avoid in the first place, right? And from a compliance standpoint, right, MFA is oftentimes required because it supports adherence to the various regulatory standards and frameworks that mandate strong access control policies. And lastly, MFA helps secure your most critical entry points. Think your email systems, cloud applications, and other services, right, that are frequently targeted by your attackers, right? And we also recommend incorporating passwordless authentication solutions into your access management strategy, because passwordless authentication also helps to reduce the risk of credential-based attacks, and it essentially helps to make the login experience faster and more secure. So if I could summarize all of this, right? MFA is low-hanging fruit, right? And it delivers high-impact protection. And it's one of the most effective and immediate ways to reduce your identity risks. Now, talking about what's next, right? Now, we talked about low-hanging fruit, which is MFA. What is next? So what should we consider to be next, right? Now, one of the things that we want to highlight here is that before you can really effectively secure your identity environment, you need to understand exactly what you're working with. And that starts with discovery, right? The first step is to find all identities, right? Both human and machine, right? This includes your employees, your contractors, your service accounts, your APIs, your tokens, your bots, anything that interacts with your various systems and resources. If it has access, it really needs to be accounted for because you can't secure what you can't see. And once identified, like the next step is to catalog these identities. That means inventorying each identity type, their permissions, and any key attributes and entitlement levels. Right? And from there, you want to map their relationships. So in other words, who or what can access which resources, whether that's applications, data, or cloud services. This ultimately gives you a full picture of how access is granted and used. And finally, this visibility allows you to spot risky access. You can identify over-permissioned or unused accounts and take action to enforce least privilege, ensuring users only have access to what they truly need. We consider this step to be foundational for building a secure, governed identity environment, and it sets the stage for everything else you need to do within your identity program, such as implementing identity governance, which includes, among other things, lifecycle management, access certification. And it also sets the stage for implementing privileged access management, where you can look to adopt the concept of least privileged access or just-in-time access. All right, what's next after that, right? AI. Everybody's talking about AI these days, right? But let's talk about where AI can fit into an identity strategy. Now, one of the key areas we're seeing AI come into play is around the subject of identity threat detection and response, or ITDR. AI-powered ITDR we're seeing that is quickly becoming essential in today's identity programs. Because right now, if you think about an authentication flow, it's still largely treated as a one-time event. You log in, and that's it. You're granted access for the rest of the session. Now with AI, we're moving towards a model where risk is continuously evaluated, even after the user logs in. It's not just about gaining access to the front door anymore. We want to keep monitoring your risk behavior even after you've walked through the front door. AI-powered systems also learn what normal behavior looks like. So when something deviates, it can act fast. Right? If the system detects something like a sudden IP change or an impossible travel scenario or actions that don't fit the user's typical pattern, it can initiate a step-up authentication request or even just revoke access entirely. The other thing to note about these types of systems is that they don't operate in a vacuum, right? Or ideally, we want to adopt a solution that doesn't operate in a vacuum. You want a solution that can help integrate with other security tools in your environment that can correlate identity behavior with the wider threat intelligence. Right? And the overall goal here is to strengthen your entire security posture. And also, this approach fits perfectly into Zero Trust framework, right? Where you never assume access is safe just because someone authenticated successfully 20 minutes ago. Now, if I could wrap this all up, right, and just detailing the future of identity security, AI isn't just enhancing how we authenticate users, it's changing the way we approach identity security as a whole. We're moving towards a unified identity security model. That means breaking down the traditional silos between IAM, PAM, and IGA to reduce overall risk. AI gives better visibility, right? Not just into human users, but also into non-human identities like your service accounts, APIs, and bots, right? That level of insight is critical in today's environment or in overall ecosystem. And by leveraging AI tools, we're no longer just reacting to threats. We're becoming proactive, identifying patterns and anomalies before they escalate, essentially, into full-blown incidents. And the future of authentication isn't just about a single moment. It's invisible. It's adaptive. It's continuous. Right, we'll see behavior-based authentication models that adjust in real time. No more static access decisions based on static or outdated rules. Right, access management, we'll see it become more fluid, dynamic, and tightly integrated with the identity intelligence and real-time context.
Oh, let's jump into this unified approach. Pascal did a great job, and thank you summing up this approach. But to dive a little bit further, we kind of look at authentication in three segments. So we think of before. So what are we doing before authentication? How are we enforcing authentication? And what are we doing after authentication? And I think based on the poll, a lot of you are using Okta. That's great. I do want to preface that what we're going to showcase in the identity security posture management space is agnostic. So you do not have to be an Okta customer. If you're interested in using this technology, you can use this technology with the technology you have today. And so in the discover and determine the before, this is what we're going to talk about is identity security posture management, how to focus on your posture. Then we'll jump into, you're probably already doing the enforce, that's your MFA. And then the after is what I'm going to pass the microphone over to Joe later on to talk about detect and respond. So what do you do from there? So before we start, I want to talk about two breaches that have occurred. And so the first is we talk about AT&T. They had their Snowflake last year penetrated by a bad actor. Another one is Capital One. They had a disgruntled ex-employee penetrate their AWS. In both of these situations, these weren't nation state actors. These weren't China, North Korea. They weren't, Russia. In the case of AT&T, it was a 25-year-old kid in his parents' basement that got passwords on the dark web and just logged in, no MFA, just logged in and was able to access troves and troves of data. In the case of Capital One, it was an employee who didn't actually use AWS, but when they left, realized they had access and it was an offboarding gap. And these things happen today, and you can have the best program for governance, your best program for offboarding, but if you have no way to audit it, then you run the risk that there could have been a mistake. And this is where posture management comes in place. So if you talk to AT&T, there's a finger pointing exercise. Was it an identity security blind spot with an MFA misconfiguration? Was it the Snowflake team? Was it the compliance team? Was it the SSO team? And nobody really knows where the problem lies, but in the end, it's a security team that has to own the repercussions. So when we talk about identity risk here at Okta, we often think of provisioning, SSO, and MFA being just the tip of the iceberg. As we go down, we start thinking unrotated API keys, password hygiene, excessive permissions, unused admin accounts, that zero trust approach, leak credentials on the dark web, and then how do we audit offboarding? What I encourage you to think about is how are you auditing these things today? And then maybe I can give you a way to do it a little bit differently. So when we talked at Okta, and I've been at Okta for over 8 years, this product's fairly new to our CISO audience, they talk about some of the issues they have. So the first issue that we often hear about is we're in cybersecurity. The business and IT continuously adopts new applications. We're not experts on those applications and we don't have visibility into them. So it's very hard for us to make sure that they're secure. And so what ISPM does is it actually goes into that application. It gains the visibility. It looks for misconfigurations and reports back our app expertise to the security team to then work with the app owners. The other thing we're hearing a lot is that every business, every application wants to enable AI. Part of AI is giving AI access to more data. This means non-human accounts, service accounts, NHI as we call it now. And all of those accounts are not tied to human beings. So if I'm given access to our customer database to an AI agent, and the business stops using that AI agent, I don't know if that account is still valid. It's not like Ron left the company and now we disable all his access. So what ISPM will do is discover all your human and non-human identities. It will inventory them, assess their posture, and provide remediation guidance. And lastly, as we continue to strive towards NIST compliance or PCI compliance or ISO compliance, as the world changes, ISPM is going to look at every environment, every application, and map any issues to your compliance frameworks that you support so that you're able to easily and quickly understand where you sit. And so, in recap, deep human and non-human identity posture analysis, prioritized end-to-end context with automatic resolution remediation, continuously evaluating, ISPM is doing, and it gives you the ability as a security team to trust the application owners, but validate that they are being secure and provide them guidance if they're not. And so how do we do this? It's very simple. Very quick, easy configuration. We use APIs. So we're an API integration. There's no agents. We'll tap into your IDP, Okta. But again, if you're not an Okta customer, maybe you're using Entra ID or Azure AD, so we could use that, Google. And then we'll tie into the applications that those IDPs are connected to. But in certain circumstances where the applications are very complex, and if some examples are AWS and Salesforce, we'll tie directly into those apps as well to ensure that there's no SSO bypass. And then we'll research all the accounts, look at their permissions, look at their usage analytics, and spit out risk prioritization. So things like unused administrators or users who are not using the permissions they've been given. We also provide remediation guidance. And this is all built in through Okta's AI graph engine that is going to be doing this in the background and every day updating you on the status. Now, with ISPM, it's easier to see it than to talk about it. So if you bear me 1 second, and hopefully the demo gods are going to be with me today, we're going to jump into a live demo of ISPM. So what you should be seeing, and Pascal, give me a thumbs up if you can see my perfect. Just want to make sure we're on the right screen. So on the top, you're going to see all the different applications that we have directly connected to. I can see in real time how many users, accounts, groups and roles, apps and resources we have. I can very quickly see on this dashboard what percentage of my users have full MFA protection. I've got some who are unprotected, some who are pending enrollment, and I could drill down right from this dashboard into those users. I can also look at my admins or high privilege users and see what percentage of those users are not using their roles. I can look at top issues, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then also look at things like high-risk users, admins by source system, and our SSO coverage. So how much of each app is being accessed via SSO versus maybe what we call SSO bypass. An example of SSO bypass would be what happened at Capital One. I can also look at partially offboarded users. So users that are offboarded in our core IDP, but are still able to access certain applications. Now, I talked earlier about graphing all of this data. So let me give you a visual representation of one of our high-risk users. So I'm clicking on Ali. Ali is in our team. And so we're going to log in right now and see Ali's visual representation. On the left, you see Ali. And then next, you'll see all the applications that Ali can access and how she accesses them. So she has an Okta account. She has an admin account, and she also has other accounts. So for example, Salesforce, she has a Break Glass account. She can directly log in. And so now she can actually access Salesforce directly as an admin. She can do the same thing for Azure. And if I look at her Okta access, I can see every application she can access from this screen. Now, Ali's determined as a high-risk user because there's some items with Ali that are not good. One is she's accessing Salesforce directly. That's not allowed. And as we go through, we'll see other areas where she might have unused accounts or passwords. So I'll just go back here to the dashboard. And so she has some leaked stale passwords. So does not have MFA configured, and her password has been exposed to a data breach. She has an admin account that's not being used. She has an admin account with no MFA and an old password on an admin account. So the password has been changed prior to the breach of her leaked stale password. So if we dive into the inventory, now I have complete view of all my accounts by application. And so, for example, if I just want to look at all my non-human administrator accounts in a couple seconds, I can pull all that information out and now see all of those non-human or Break Glass or service accounts across all the different applications and any issues that may be associated with them. I can also look at groups. So all of the groups and roles you have in your IDP in Okta, you can now see the utilization of those. So are these actually being used by users? Do we have maybe too many groups that are not being used and maybe we've overcomplicated our identity deployment? I can look at applications and see what their MFA protection is across each app to make sure that each app is fully protected. I can also go in and see if there's applications that maybe certain users are not using. So for example, I'll pick Splunk because it's the first app there, and I can type in Splunk here. And now what I'm going to be able to do is see every single user that has access to Splunk. Then I can very quickly show me anyone who hasn't accessed it for more than, I don't know, let's say 6 months. And now I can export this and do a certification campaign for all these users that might have access that don't need it. I can do the same thing for resources as well. Now, let's dive into issues because issues are the most important. ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management, is meant to be a very quick and easy tool that will drive through all that inventory I just showed you and find the problems without giving you a lot of what we would like to call noise. And so very quickly, we have 4 different levels. So toxic combinations, that's our dark red, high issues in red, medium in yellow, and then low in the gray. And we're quickly identifying what are the most critical issues. So let's pick leaked stale password and account without MFA. So in this area, I have 6 active issues. It tells me the source system where this issue persists. So these are in Entra and Google Workspace. I can see when the password was breached on the dark web, when they last changed their password, the last activity of this account, and the MFA status. Now, to solve this, I don't need to be an expert on Azure AD. If I click on this little wrench, it's going to give me a link that's going to allow me to enforce MFA on this account and force the user to reset the password. And so this will take me right to the Azure console where I can make that change. And I can either fix this myself if I'm an Azure admin and I've been given access to ISPM, or we can actually push this down either through automation or manual, depending on how you set it up, to your ITSM tool for a ticket. So now that I saw there's a question on here, how do we get this data? Remember, this is API based. So it's a quick 15-minute API configuration that we connect the system. There is no agents involved in ISPM. So it's a very fast, lightweight install. Now, this is just one example of an issue, but remember, every issue is going to be giving you a description, the risk and impact, and the suggested remediation.
Ron, there's an interesting question that may lead you into another issue, potentially. Attendees asking, where does ISPM stand with break glass accounts that are used generally for SSO configuration? They can go unused for months after setup until SSO integration fails.
Yeah, so I think when we think about SSO bypass admin accounts, we can actually show that information right here based on integration. So for example, I've got one here for GitHub where this is an SSO bypass, but they've configured MFA on GitHub. So they're still protected. In this example with Entra, there's no MFA status. And so there's different ways to remediate them. So either we can vault these in like a privilege access management system, or we can find a way to put these through SSO. So in the example of generating an SSO config, yes, obviously that account, you can't do that. You need those break glass accounts. So those would be vaulted. That would be the recommendation. In the case where they're just direct admin accounts for other reasons, we can go ahead and remediate through this. But we do inventory and record them.
Just to add to that, Ron, so I think that the very nature of this tool is to be able to give you visibility into those SSO accounts that were used, or configuration or admin accounts that were used to initially set up SSO to begin with. Any of these unused accounts, any of these dormant accounts, any of these backdoor accounts that were established before SSO was in place, this is a tool that will give you that visibility into those types of accounts and understanding whether or not they're still active, right? Because again, as I mentioned in my presentation, those dormant accounts, those unused accounts, particularly those that are privileged, are the ones that our attackers are after. So to Ron's point, once you do that discovery exercise and you gain visibility of those accounts, then you need to map that into your PAM solution, right? So that you can wrap security policies around how you gain access to those identities and rotate those credentials if possible.
And another example, unrotated admin access keys, right? That we're now monitoring across all your different applications. Another detection we have which is around unused permissions. So I'll use AWS as an example for this one because of the capital one. But here are examples of users that have access to permissions, and we dictate, we will let you know which ones have not been used and for how long. So you can then remove those permissions as they might not need them. Now, I know the Oscar music is about to play soon, and Pete's going to ask me to move on. So I'm going to show you 3 quick things. This is obviously a 15-minute nice quick touch, but we can choose your security framework that matters to you. We can choose the environments that matter to you. And it doesn't have to be just like AWS. It could be which account in AWS that matters. Maybe it's applicable for PCI. And then we'll map all the security controls based on those frameworks, based on the different sources, and give you an exact applied percentage and drill down right into the issues to resolve. Now, it doesn't stop here. So if we go back to how do we help you solve this? So data-driven trust, continuous improvement, time to value, those are our value propositions. It's going to be very quick. But there's also an entire area of remediation. So this is where working with partners like Alchemy can really help. We can choose whether we're going to give access to the console to the various app owners for them to do based on their role. They'd only get access to their issues, and they can click and do the remediation right from the console if they have access to make those changes. We can upload the issues automatically to your ITSM tool, like a Jira Service Desk or ServiceNow. And then using Okta technology, like our certification campaign and our workflows, we can even automatically remediate issues based on your policies. So I will leave you with this. Right now, for Alchemy customers, reach out to your person at Alchemy, and we can do a proof of value. So as I said, the product's great, but until you see your own data, the value is tough to understand. We're right now doing proof of values for customers. It takes about 20 minutes to configure, and the AI engine can give you results in as little as 48 hours. So let's set that up. We'll show you the value. And going back to this security mapping, we're going to help you focus on the discover and determine. And that's going to help you create a very strong foundation. That's your cement base that you can build your house of identity on top of. Now, once you've got that strong base with good locks and windows and doors closed, now you want to be able to detect when somebody enters that. And so for that, we're going to move over to Joe to do just detect and respond. And any other questions, ask in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
So let me take over sharing, and we can go into the detect and respond piece of it. And this is where you will encounter identity threat protection with Okta in the video. So safe harbor again, flashing. We're going to talk about what's currently existing, but also what's coming down the pipe. So need to flash this per legal. Now, where we want to talk about is great. ISPM gave you this solid foundation, but the more and more you do security practitioners, the attackers and the nation state actors and the threat actors are getting even more sophisticated. Just like we can deploy AI to beefen up our sort of response, they are using AI as well to increase the sophistication of attacks, right? And a big place, now that you have your cement base with ISPM, you've enforced phishing resistant factors at auth, you have all of that, the threat actors are moving towards post-authentication and what the gaps are there. So the stats speak for themselves. Around 2 billion session cookies were stolen from Fortune 1000 companies in 2023, right? That's a huge amount. So even after you have all of this, there are ways that attackers are able to get hold of active sessions of users in your organizations and move laterally through your ecosystem and try and cause maximum havoc. And how do you not just detect such intrusions, but also automatically remediate this? This is where identity threat protection comes into play. So again, it is the whole unified identity. We spoke about our core access management. We went into security posture management. And where ITP comes in play is it's continuously monitoring user activity. It is able to detect anonymous activity and provide precision tailored response. And it comes with robust observability that helps you with your threat investigation, activities that your SOC teams would do. So traditionally, as time progresses, the assurance lowers. What that means in simple terms is I've authenticated into my application with a phishing resistant MFA. Great. Am I protected? Yes. But as time goes on, the assurance of that keeps lowering because there is a chance that something you click on a malware link, your token gets exfiltrated, it replays. So as time goes on, the assurance reduces. Now, what could you do? You could maybe make the user authenticate more frequently, reduce the session time, right? And that's a great way to prevent this. But then you have to deal with user fatigue, MFA fatigue, user friction. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a way where, it's seamless for the user, at the same time, post-authentication, they continue to be protected, right? So that's where identity threat protection comes into play. So key things, continuous monitoring of all active sessions and automatic response. So this is sort of our identity threat protection. It's like, there's just this slide, and then because we're short on time, I'm going to go into the UI and a demo. But with identity protection, what we have in the middle is our risk engine, right? What you have on the left-hand side, for the risk engine to determine risk, it needs to receive signals. And these signals could come from our first-party real-time signals, like our device context, administrators or end users reporting risk, us seeing changes in IPs in active sessions, us detecting brute force attacks, suspicious app access, sessions being played from high threat IPs, things like that. So all of these are our first-party signals that can feed into our risk engine. Similarly, we also integrate with a wide variety of security vendors in the ecosystem where they can send us risk signals through what's called the shared signals framework. And this is a back channel where we've come up with the CAPE protocol, and all of these vendors adhere to that protocol to be able to do risk sharing. And this is very powerful because not only are you using your own, Okta's identity plane risks, you are also able to receive risks from other threat surfaces or other security planes like your endpoint, your network, your CASB, your ZTNA, all of this. So you're able to get all of this, feed it into the risk engine. And the risk engine is AI powered, similar to our ISPM's graph engine. And what it can do is, based on this risk, based on user behavior, user history, various inputs into that risk, it is able to generate a risk score and assign it with that user. And it is able to automatically, increase, decrease this risk score based on that context at that period of time. And based on that, you can configure real-time actions that can be triggered when maybe, say, the risk goes to a medium or the risk goes to a high. Now, some of these real-time actions, the most powerful of this is universal logout. So we can configure policy to say that, we are detecting this sort of risk and the risk is at a high level, configure universal logout, which means all those applications, not just your Okta, but any application that supports universal logout, we can kill active user sessions, app sessions, not just sessions, but app sessions as well. So think of a simple example where, I'm a user of an organization. I come into work, I log into my Okta portal, I open Salesforce, G Suite, all my other apps that I need to do my day-to-day work. For some reason, decide to be adventurous, click on some link about some concert tickets. It's a phishing link. My Okta cookie or my Okta session token is exfiltrated and replayed from somewhere else. The moment it gets replayed, our risk engine is able to detect that, and it will say, I'm going to remove all sessions, not just Okta sessions, but also application sessions. Just think of how powerful that is. You are protecting the user continuously. Some of the other actions could be inline MFA. If you see, something changing in that existing user session, you might decide you want to prompt for step up. Or you could send the signals downstream as well. Just like we receive signals from upstream vendors, we can also send it downstream. And then finally, if you're an Okta customer, you've most probably heard of our no-code platform workflows where you can configure bespoke responses, maybe raise a Jira ticket, quarantine the user, alert the SecOps team, do all sorts of whatever, or call your existing security playbooks that you may have, right? You can hook into that through workflows. And all of this is wrapped around our observability and feedback pipeline, which is a fancy way of saying there is robust reporting and you have dashboards at a glance, your SecOps teams can come and see which users are at risk, what sorts of risks are affecting your tenant at any given point in time, and take appropriate action and focus on only the most critical risks. You don't have like a whole bunch of things that you need to look at. So basically optimize your time. So the outcomes, we want to enhance your security posture, seamless integration with your other vendors. We want to reduce user friction. Users should not be fatigued by multiple MFA prompts, having to re-op every hour, things like that. Threat mitigation and reduce credential misuse. So with this, I am going to move into my UI. So this is my Okta administration console. If you look at the dashboard, you'll now see widgets for identity threat protection. If you go into the reporting, let's go into reports, you'll have a new section for identity threat protection reports. If I look at, say, the entity risk report, and let me edit the filters to do the last 90 days, it's going to show you, okay, these were the types of risks that your tenant encountered in the last 90 days. Security event provider reported risk. This is, like I said, our third-party risk signal. In this case, it was JAM, and it flagged high risk. Suspicious app access. The access frequency seemed off, and Okta AI detected that and raised that as a risk. Admins reporting risk. Now, in some cases, as an administrator, you may have your own playbook to detect risk in some disconnected system, or that behaviorally something's changed. You want to mark the user as high risk. Admins can report that, and that can trigger your precision response. So this is one such detection. Session influence user risk, where the ITP engine suspects that the session is hijacked. So you can see all of these in your dashboard. You can see additional details and the action that was triggered as a result of this. So in this case, when there was a session influence user risk where we suspected the session to be hijacked, we triggered a universal logout. In some other cases where we saw suspicious app activity, we triggered a workflow. In this case, the workflow, like I said, is bespoke. I think this put the user in a quarantine group. You can take different sorts of actions based on the detection type, the level of risk, and how you want to respond to that threat. And all of this is happening real time. You can also see users who are at high risk in your environment at any given time. And you can see that both in the dashboard as well as our reporting. Now, on the users tab itself, we have a new, let's take my test user, Tina. We have the concept of a user risk, entity risk low, and this is in the context of this user, Tina Smith. One of the actions as an admin, one of the detections that I said was I can go and elevate risk. And the moment this becomes high, I can configure policy to say what needs to happen as a response to this. And this was something that I initiated as an admin, but it could be initiated by anything. Just think, brute force activity, suspicious application access, some sort of session hijacking activity, traffic coming from a high threat IP. Any of these could elevate the user risk, and the engine will respond in real time, right? So there's no gap, there's no delay in your response. Also, you can see a risk tab for our users with all sorts of risks that they have been exposed to. I think this one is 7 days, but you can go into our reporting to see more information. And if you look at this, they're saying there was a change, suspected session hijacking. Her session got replayed from some sort of an anonymizing proxy, right? That's the detail. And right now in my demo, I configured no action because I was testing something out, but this could very well be a universal logout or a workflow. And the cool thing is you can provide feedback to our AI engine to say if this is a true positive or a false positive. So the AI continues to learn based on the input that you've provided. So not just user behavior, it learns user patterns and determines how to score the risk, but also feedback provided by the administrative persona. So that's about the risk engine. That's about the user risk. Now we've set up a whole new policy framework for identity threat protection. So if you go under security, you go under entity risk policy, you'll see I've set up how I want to handle the response for different types of detections. Let's take a look at one of them. It's similar to how Okta policy is structured, right? Any group, it's session influence user risk where session has been hijacked. And what I can do is I can log out and revoke tokens, which is triggering universal logout, or I could run a bespoke workflow and I can pick the workflow that I want to know. use, right? Trigger from suspicious app access. Now, you can configure based on the detection, based on the risk level, you can configure what action you want to take. And also based on the user group. So now if you have like a VIP group containing your exec audience, you don't want to log them out, right? That's not a good experience. You might want to immediately get SecOps attention on that. So you trigger a workflow, a high alert goes out, you go, somebody talks to them, or you have a Jira ticket, whatever you do for your exec audience. So you can, for that, you could maybe run a workflow for that particular group. For the other folks, you could do universal logout. So you can go as granular as you want and based on the risk level as well. So this is our entity risk policy. The supported detections are critical actions from high threat IP. If we see things like password reset or authentication attempts or MFA reset, all of this coming from IPs that we flag as high threat, we are going to raise this detection. Security events provider risk is third-party risk. Similarly, we have detections for brute force, admin reported, end user reported, suspicious app access, and Okta threat intelligence. Okta threat intelligence is, based on our whole Okta ecosystem. Whatever we consider as high threat IPs, we can flag those and you can take appropriate action there. And then configuring our third-party providers, we can do that in, our under device integrations. We don't have time for that. I won't go into that now. But the key thing to remember is whenever we detect a change in a user's session context, we will reevaluate their policies. And that is what's providing you continuous authentication. So I logged in, I was at work, my session got replayed from Russia. It's an active session, but it gets replayed. So there's a change in the context. We're going to reevaluate your policies. So not just mark you as high threat and take action, but reevaluate your policy. And if we have a rule in your policy that says, if you're from a high-risk country, deny access. So if you look at this, I have a rule right here that says, deny access for high-risk locations. So when I authenticated initially, I authenticated with a phishing-resistant factor. My cookie got exfiltrated. My session token got exfiltrated. When it got replayed, the rule got reevaluated. They hit the deny. It's going to trigger whatever action you've set up, whether that be universal logout or workflows. So it's pretty powerful. And yeah, I'm going to stop now because I think we are short on time. But I hope that gave you a quick idea on what identity threat protection is all about. And I encourage you to take a look at the documentation and reach out. Thank you.
All right. So here is the QR code on the screen. So that's for our Okta Mastermind session. And just to summarize it, you get some time with one of our alchemists and you get to tear apart your environment, get some requirements on paper, and walk away with some meaningful actions. And part of that, we can also work with you to get deeper dives into Okta, et cetera. So Pascal runs those. Anything I missed, Pascal?
No, that was well stated. Yeah.
All right. I just want to give a quick shout out to the panels today. So Pascal, Ron, Joe, thank you for jumping in. Pascal, any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think I look forward to anybody who's interested in wanting to conduct an Okta Mastermind, right? As Pete mentioned, it's an opportunity for us to understand a little bit about what you're looking to do around your identity strategy, and we can help to formulate a roadmap and a plan to help you elevate your maturity, right? As you saw on the different slides, there's a lot to be sort of concerned about in terms of identity and the way identity threats are evolving in the ecosystem. So yeah, happy to jump on the session with anybody who's interested and talk more about how we can help improve that.
And Ron, any final thoughts for the audience?
No, just thank you to Pascal and you, Pete, for running an excellent session here today. And from Okta, we appreciate the partnership, and we're really looking forward to helping everyone conquer that before, during, and after authentication piece. We're super excited to jump in and partner.
Awesome. And I just want to say I love the demo. I could see you go a million different ways with that demo. So it's pretty cool. Joe, any final thoughts?
I just want to echo what Ron said. Identity is tough. Security is tough. As we are evolving, so are the attackers. We have to stay one step ahead of them. And as practitioners, you have to think the worst case scenarios and prepare for that. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, all right. Well, thank you folks for jumping in today. I know you all are very busy and I appreciate you guys taking time. Look forward to seeing you on the next Alchemy in the Lab. And as I always say, have a great day and see you all on the flip side.